All right, let's peel back the layers of history on an entire nation. In this explainer, we're going to tackle a really fundamental question about the Philippines, one that might just change everything you thought you knew about its beginnings. So let me ask you that right now. When you think about the start of Philippine history, what's the first year that pops into your head? For so many people and for generations of Filipinos, there's one very specific date that's been taught as the definitive starting point. And there it is, 1521. That's the year Ferdinand Magellan's European expedition lands on the islands. It's so often presented as year one, the moment the archipelago finally steps onto the world stage and its recorded history officially kicks off. But that's the very idea we're going to challenge today. What if 1521 isn't the beginning at all? What if it's just an interruption of a story that was already hundreds of thousands of years in the making? Let's hit rewind. And I mean way, way back. Okay, our journey starts in the deep, deep past. And we're not talking about centuries here. We're talking about a timescale that's almost hard to wrap your head around. No, that's not a typo. 709,000 years ago. That is the date of the earliest evidence we have of hominin activity in the Philippines. Get this. In Kalinga, archaeologists found 57 stone tools right next to the fossilized bones of a butchered rhinoceros. This tells us that ancient human relatives were living, hunting, and thriving there over 500,000 years before modern humans even existed. Just think about that. And what's so wild about this timeline is the sheer scale of it. So after that first evidence, we leap forward to 134,000 years ago, and we find Homo luzonensis, a totally unique species of ancient human. Then, another huge jump to 47,000 years ago, and that's when the first anatomically modern humans show up. It's only after these vast stretches of time that we see the great Austronesian migration that would go on to shape the population as we know it today. And this is where it all gets real. This is the entrance to the Taban Caves in Palawan. This is the spot. It was right here that the remains of Taban man were discovered, giving us the oldest solid proof of modern humans in the Philippines from about 47,000 years ago. So here's the crucial point. While ancient humans have this incredibly long history on the islands, the genetic and cultural landscape we see today was largely shaped by a different group entirely. Starting around 3000 BCE, these amazing seafaring people we call Austronesians began migrating south from Taiwan. This out-of-Taiwan model is what explains how their languages, their culture, and their DNA spread like wildfire across the islands and way, way beyond. Now, these early societies weren't just developing in a bubble. No way, they were part of a sophisticated and seriously interconnected world. For thousands of years, the islands weren't some forgotten place at the edge of the world. They were a central crossroads for trade. And this just illustrates that point perfectly. For 3,000 years, the Philippines was a key player in what's called the maritime Jade Road. We're not talking about a few boats trading trinkets here. This was one of the biggest, most extensive sea-based trade networks for a single material anywhere in the prehistoric world, linking societies across thousands of miles of open ocean. This map from 200 BCE really helps you visualize that world, doesn't it? You can see the Philippines isn't some blank spot on the map. It's an integral part of a region just buzzing with trade and cultural exchange, connected to powerful cultures like the Sahuing and what we now call Vietnam. And the stuff being traded? It was incredible. You had precious materials like jade coming in from Taiwan, but the islands themselves were exporting a ton of their own resources. We're talking gold, silk, unique textiles like Kapik cotton, and really valuable yellow beeswax. This wasn't simple barter. This was a complex and booming economy. But here's the thing that just blows my mind. The peak of all this trade happened during a period of almost unbelievable peace. It lasted for 1,500 years, from 500 BCE to 1000 CE. Archaeologists have looked at burial sites from this millennium and a half, and they've found zero evidence of violent death. Not a single one. All that long-term peace and prosperity, it allowed for something else to grow. Complex political structures. So now we're entering the age of kingdoms, or what historians call polities, which flourished all across the archipelago long before any Europeans showed up. And this artifact, this is our anchor. This is the Laguna copper plate inscription, and it is a complete game changer. It's dated to the year 900, which makes it the earliest written document ever found in the Philippines. This is hard proof of a society with literacy, math, astronomy, and a formal legal system, all more than 600 years before Magellan even set sail. And you know what? It tells a very human story. The inscription is basically a legal document, a receipt. It says that a man named Na Moran, along with his kids, are officially cleared of a major debt they owed to the chief of Tondo. This isn't a myth or a legend. This is real history with real people and real-life problems. And Tondo wasn't alone, not by a long shot. As you can see on this map, the political landscape was incredibly vibrant. The archipelago was dotted with all these independent states. You've got Butuan down here in the south, Cebu in the middle, and various sultanates. There was no single empire, but a complex web of sophisticated and often competing maritime kingdoms. And inside these kingdoms, society had a pretty clear structure. It was typically organized into three main tiers. At the very top, you had the nobility, the rulers with titles like Datu, Raja, or Lakan. Below them were the freemen. And at the bottom, you had a class of debtor bondsmen whose status was usually tied to a debt they had to work off, which is very different from the concept of chattel slavery. I just love this side-by-side comparison. On the right, you have the proof of that complex legal system from the year 900. And on the left, you have an illustration from the late 1500s showing the descendants of that very culture, the Tagalog nobility, decked out in fine silks and dripping with gold. Together, these two images just paint this powerful picture of a sophisticated, organized, and wealthy civilization. So let's pull all these different threads together. We've gone from ancient human relatives to massive trade networks to flourishing kingdoms. The story is just so much bigger, so much richer and more complex than that one single date in 1521. When you look at the full timeline like this, it just clicks. You can see it so clearly. The pre-colonial history isn't just a short little intro chapter, it's the main event. It's the vast bulk of the story. This whole era of chiefdoms, ancient migrations, and global trade, that's the massive foundation that the colonial and modern periods were built on. It wasn't a blank slate waiting to be discovered, it was a thriving world. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Knowing that the history of the Philippines doesn't stretch back 500 years, but over 700,000, knowing that it includes thousands of years of peace, continent-spanning trade networks, and complex societies with their own laws, how does that change the way we see the Philippines today? How does it reshape our understanding of its identity, its culture, and its place in the world?